Okay, I'm going to try this week and next week, as we've been going through the Old Testament and understanding the chosen, or the people of the Israelites and the lineage that God used to bring about the Messiah. I'm going to try to get through tonight and tomorrow, if we can, the life of Joseph. Okay? So we're going to move on to Joseph now. All right? So if you remember, Joseph is the firstborn of Rachel, who Jacob loved Rachel more than any other woman, right? And because of that, you're going to find out he loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. He loved Joseph because he was the firstborn from Rachel.
What chapter are we on?
We are going to start in chapter,
what?
I wrote it down, 37.
Genesis.
37. All right?
I have a comment.
I got 35.
Saying that about Rachel.
Well, I missed.
If you back up,
so I got.
When Jacob sent his servant,
Isaac sent his servant
Isaac sent his
for
servant.
Jacob.
Yes. That was a God thing.
Yeah.
So Rachel was the God thing, which meant Joseph, it makes sense that he would be chosen. To me, it does. Because a lot of people are like, why has he always had him as his favorite? And I do realize Rachel was his favorite as well, but
Yeah.
I think it's because that he really was chosen, so that little nudge there helped.
It's really interesting how we're going to find out later on that Jesus comes from the line of Judah, and Judah actually was a child of Hagar. I'm not Hagar. Hold on a minute.
Which one was she? Leah?
The first, the slave of Sarah. What was her name?
Oh. Yes. We have that written down.
I can't remember who it was. Her name.
I can't either.
Anyway, so you think about that. Leah. Leah.
Leah was the first wife.
Leah was the first wife.
Right.
Yeah, not
Rachel's
the
sister.
Yeah, but Leah was not the one that Jacob really loved. He loved Rachel. But Judah comes actually from Leah. So we're going to find out later on how different people in the lineage of Jacob still plays a vital role, even though they're not directly responsible for the coming of the Messiah. He didn't come directly from their line. It's just really neat how God uses these people. So anyway, let's pick it up in chapter 37. It said, "And Jacob dwelt in a land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. And these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report." That's it. Okay. Now, so anyway, so Joseph brought to the father an evil report. Joseph is a tattleteller. Joseph's a snitch. Okay? So everybody knows when you got a brother or sister and there's a snitch, you're going to build up some animosity, aren't you? Okay, so that right there is against him. Now, but verse 3, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children." Uh-oh, there's strike two. See that? How many of you know how dangerous it is to, "Hey Justin, good to see you." You just snuck right in here, didn't you? Good to see you.
Yeah, I was sick for about a month.
Oh, wow.
Both of my ears were clogged up, and I had a horrible sinus infection. And then Dad got sick too.
Okay. Well, there's been
We'll
a
be
lot
here
of
this
sickness
Sunday,
on
though.
it, but you guys are finally recovering.
Yeah.
Good.
Starts at 11 too, by the way, Sunday.
This Sunday at 11, just this Sunday. So that gives you time to get up in the morning and open all your Christmas presents from Santa and still get to church. Okay? All right, so now, verse 3. Now Israel, and we know that Israel is Jacob, right? Jacob in Israel is interchangeable. Remember that? because when Jacob wrestled with the angel changed his name from Jacob to Israel. Remember that? Okay, so it's interchangeable here sometimes. All right, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was a son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him even more. You know, you got Joseph not playing with full deck. I mean, in the sense that he snitches on his brothers, and then he has this awesome dream where basically, we'll find out in a minute, the dream that he tells his brothers, and it really just exacerbated their hatred for him. You know, he's not very wise when it comes to that. But you know what? God's going to use Joseph. Just like he uses us. Sometimes we're not very wise. He's going to use him. So he said in verse 6, and he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. I mean, Joseph is just not getting along with his brothers. Okay? Verse 9, and he dreamed yet another dream, and he told it to his brothers. I mean, come on, Joseph, right? They already don't like you, now you're going to just keep adding fuel to the fire?
Dig it in.
Digging it in. And he told this to his brothers, for in verse 9, and behold, I've dreamed a dream once more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bow down to me. Okay, well, the 11 stars, that's his brothers. He's the 12th of the 12 tribes of Israel. So he's talking about his brothers. And he told this to his father and to his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brother, see, so not only just brothers, but the sun and the moon, so that's the father and the mother are going to bow down to him too. See? Shall I and your mother and your brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to you, to the earth? And his brothers envied him, but his father took notice of the same. And his brethren went to feed their flocks in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not your brothers feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you unto them. And he said to him, Here am I. So once again, his 11 brothers go out to feed the sheep, and he's staying at home. Okay? He's not a part. They don't want him there in the fields with him, right? They hate him. They don't want him around. So verse 14, and so Israel said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with your brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, Who do you seek? And he said, I seek my brothers. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, They are departed from here, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him from afar, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to kill him. And they said to one another, Look, this dreamer comes. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it. Now Reuben, if you remember, he's the oldest. Okay? So he's the older brother of the 11. He's the older brother. How many of you know the oldest of them, they're almost like the father. They take care of the younger ones, right? They're the more sensible ones, right?
Usually.
And Reuben said unto them, and Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and he said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, instead shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that's in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. So Reuben was going to hope they'd throw him in the pit, and then once his brothers were not looking, he was going to bail him out and take him back to the father. He didn't want to kill him. Okay? Verse 24, so they took him and they cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. So it was basically a well rather than a pit. And they sat down.
My Bible says it's a cistern.
A cistern. Not a brethren, but a cistern.
No, a cistern. Like,
I said, yeah, I know. I said not a brethren, but a cistern. Never mind, Sharon. Verse 25. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels. Now, wait a minute. Where did the Ishmaelites come from? Ishmael. And who was part of that? Esau, right? Right? So you still got Jacob and Esau. They're just still with each other, right? You know, today we've still got Jacob and Esau in the Middle East, don't we? You got the Jews and you got the Muslims, and the Ishmaelites are the Muslims, and they're still at war with each other. So anyway, and a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother in our flesh. And his brothers were satisfied with this. Then there passed by the Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and they lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes. Now see, Reuben was the one that said, let's don't kill him, right? He was going to go bail him out. So his other brothers, evidently without Reuben's knowledge, did this. And Judah was the one that gave him the idea, let's don't kill him, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. Okay? I don't know where Reuben was at the time when he did this, but he wasn't privy to this. Okay? And so verse 30, and he returned his brethren, and he said, the child is not, in other words, Joseph, their young brother, is not there. And I wonder, where shall I go? And verse 31, and they took Joseph's coat, and they killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the coat in blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and said, this have we found, know now whether it be your son's coat or not. Now remember, they said they were going to tell their father that a beast got him. You know, that they were going to say that. They were going to tell their father that a beast got him, and while they were going to kill him, right? But now, if you'll notice, they don't really say that. They just give the coat and let Israel or Jacob come to his own conclusion. So it's still lying by deception. But they didn't actually lie directly, right?
By omission.
Yeah, that's right, by omission. So, let's see. And in verse 33, and Jacob knew it and said, it is my son's coat, an evil beast hath devoured him. See, that's what they were going to tell him anyway, right? Joseph is without doubt torn into pieces. So Jacob tore his clothes, and back in the, anyway, that was a sign of grief for the Israelites. Whenever you were in grieving, you would just rip your clothes. You just tear your tunic or your robe or what, you just tear it open, okay? And then a lot of times they'd even pour ashes on their head. That was their symbol of grieving, okay?
Question.
Yeah.
So
right here we go back to Jacob.
Right.
Why is that? Because it's a sudden switch from Israel to Jacob.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know, other than the fact that, I don't know, other than the fact that as God gave this to Moses and inspired him to write this, it was, for some reason, Israel was without faith, I guess.
Yeah.
Whenever God calls Jacob, Jacob, it's because he's acting out of faith.
Right.
Well,
Even though he's already been given a new name assigned by God as Israel, whenever he calls him Jacob, he's acting or living in lack of
he's
faith.
believing the lie here,
Right.
and that's what I get from it, is he's going calm.
Well, and God, remember, it says back here that when his brothers all called him a dreamer, the father rebuked him, but he still wondered. Right? So Jacob being a man of faith, and he's had his own God moments, remember? He's had his own God moments,
He could
his
be
own
thinking this
epiphanies.
could be a God
He,
moment.
he, he should have maybe thought, now my son's had this dream. And if you remember, Abraham was told in that covenant that God made with him that they would go into slavery for 400 years into Egypt. Okay? And that they would live in Egypt for 400 years, and then God would bring them out after 400 years, right? So there was a plan that Abraham and all these people knew about. Okay? So, you know, maybe Jacob should have said, okay, I believe, I don't believe he's dead. Why would God give him this dream? You know, so maybe that's why it's calls him Jacob. He's not acting in faith.
It's just funny how that switches real sudden there.
Yeah, yeah. You know, let's stop and think about that a minute. We're no different from Jacob in the way that sometimes we live our lives. A lot of times we want to live like Israel and be close to God, be a friend of God. But then there's sometimes even in a Christian walk, we don't act like friends of God, we act like Jacob. We walk in unbelief.
And that could be on a daily basis.
And it can be on a daily basis. Yeah, that's the beauty even in the Old Testament. You get a shadow of humanity, you get a glimpse or a synopsis of human behavior and how God loves us in spite of how fickle we are in our faith.
Well, that's why he sent his son.
That's right. So verse 34, so Jacob tore his clothes and he put sackcloth on his loins, and he mourned for his son many days. So sackcloth's like burly cloth, so it's uncomfortable, right? It's like, you ever, when you were a kid or something, have a wool coat or something, it just scratched you to death. You know, your mom bought you a wool coat or something, thought you'd be warm, and it just scratched you to death. Like, why'd my mom buy this coat for me? She doesn't love me anymore. Yeah.
Like
So-
burlap.
Sir, burlap, like burlap.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We had that on the farm.
Yep.
That's what we put feed in.
okay.
That bag.
Very uncomfortable.
Yeah, very uncomfortable.
It wouldn't be good.
But see, he put that on his loin, and that's going to make it uncomfortable, right? So that's, again, if you know, there's no sense being happy when you should be mourning. And you can even inflict physical pain on yourself to make sure you're not going to smile during this time. Thus his father, let's see. So, verse 35, and all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and he said, for I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. Okay, so they didn't just sell him to anybody. They took him to Egypt, and Potiphar saw him there on the slave trade, and Potiphar bought him as his house slave. Okay, all right.
What's the difference between the Ishmaelites and the Midianites?
The Midianites were just a tribe of people that believed in Moses. Actually, we'll find out later on, marries a Midianite woman.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so the Midianites were just a different tribe. They ended up believing more in the Islamic faith as well. They didn't believe in Jehovah.
How did they end up with Joseph?
Well, the Midianites were traders anyway. They were known to be traders.
So the
I don't
Ishmaelites
mean-
traded him to, okay.
commercial traders, not traders.
Right.
Traders. Commercial traders. Boy, this hillbilly dialect of mine gets in troubles, man. So they were known, that's how they basically, they would just trade goods. And so they'd take goods. So if you remember in Genesis, remember the different people that were like craftsmen and they did bronze and smelting? Chances are they made that stuff and then that's what they sold, their wares. Okay? Okay, so Joseph is supposedly dead, but instead he's been sold to the Egyptians, okay? So now let's go find out in chapter 39. Skipping 38 because it has nothing to do with Joseph. Chapter 39. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down from there. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. I mean, the fact that he ended up where he did was ordained of God. He was prosperous in the fact that he didn't end up in just any Egyptian house as a household slave. He ended up in Potiphar's, who was captain of Pharaoh's guard. Okay? Highfalutin. Okay? Verse 3, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, that's Potiphar, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive. He gave him, he trusted him with everything. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. So Potiphar saw a distinct difference when Joseph was there. It changed things for him. Verse 6, and he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not everything that he possessed, except for the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, come, lie with me. But he refused, and he said unto his master's wife, listen, my master has left everything with me that's in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I. Neither has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass as she spoke to Joseph day by day. Listen, day by day. This was not just a one-time thing. Joseph was being tempted constantly. And chances are, if he was that high up, she probably had everything an Egyptian woman needed to look beautiful. You know? She was not mummified. She had facelifts and all kinds of stuff. And it came to pass, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not listen to her to lie with her or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his work, and there was none of the other men of the house were there. And she called him by his garment, saying, come lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. King James said, and got him out. He got out there. He flew the coop. Verse 13, and it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and it fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and said unto them, saying, See, he has brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled, and got him out. I wonder if when God gives this to Moses, if he said, Moses said, what? He did what? Because Moses is right now. You know, and we got to think about this too, folks. That's another reason why God chose Moses as an Israelite to go into Pharaoh's house, because most of the Hebrews were uneducated people. But Moses learned from the Egyptians. He was very smart and brilliant. So then when God called him out of deliverance and let him know that he was an Israelite, he was able to come back and write this down. These first 5 books of the Old Testament are from Moses, right? Okay, so where was I? I can't remember where I was.
16. 16.
16. And so she laid up his garment beside her until his Lord came home. And she spoke unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which you have brought into us came unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke unto him, saying, After the manner did your servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. In other words, he was pretty mad. Right? And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in prison. Now listen, he put him where the king's prisoners were bound. He didn't just put him in prison. Did you catch that? He's in Folsom prison. He's in the deep recess. He's in a heap of trouble. Most of the people go to the king's prison. It's off with their head eventually. They're on death row. Verse 21, But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. And whatsoever they did there, he was the director of it. Good grief, right? He goes from being on death row to now running the prison. He's the warden. How many of you know, how many of you feel like in your job and stuff, that God has placed you in your job and it just, like everything you do, it just turns to gold? Anybody? I feel like that in this produce job I've got. It's like, almost everything I do, just my customers love me and my company loves me, and it's like, it's just natural. It's just God's blessing.
God's favor.
God's favor. It's not me. It's just, I don't know. It's just really, but you just see that you just know it's God. You got to give God the credit for it. And Joseph did everything he did, though, turn to gold. I mean, it was just crazy. But I can understand this, you know. How many of you know people see work as a curse? Work is not a curse. Work is not a curse.
I miss work.
It's a blessing. You know? Because you know what? Made in the image of God, guess what God does? God's a worker. God never stops working. God never rests. God never takes vacation. God rested one time as in the first week on the 7th day. He rested. He said, boy, I did a good job. Wow. And ever since then, he's been working. And we're made in his image, which means we really need to find where we're gifted and then give our best, because that's just what God wants us to do.
tried, Brother Don, to, about a couple of years ago, I tried to get a job at a place down the street from me. I think it's called the Plastic Company. And so the lady took down all my information, and she kept looking at me very skeptically. Can't imagine why.
I can't either, Tony.
Kept looking at
And
her
Amy
skeptically and
said,
couldn't imagine
"Mom,
why.
that's not good,
The lady kept looking at
because
her
people in
skeptically
the
and she couldn't
workplace are
understand why.
wicked nowadays." Because I went in there and told her how I had a skill for, I've been in Bible study classes, like college, for about 15 years. So I had some know-how, is what I was trying to tell her,
Debatable.
that maybe I could get a job. And I know she looked at that and thought, you are out of your mind. And the Lord spoke to me that night about what I did. And I don't remember if I asked him if it was okay or not. I usually try to. And here's what he said. Am I not enough? In other words, I could live on my income. See,
You
I
didn't
had
have-
an income.
Didn't have to go back to work.
And if you're careful with your money and don't, blow it,
Right.
he says, I'll help you. You don't have to go back to work. And think about what he said. Am I not enough? So he says that to us also, all of us. Am I not enough that he will take care of us?
Yeah.
Isn't that fantastic?
It really, yes,
And
it
you
is.
know, I've not looked for another job, but I believe I could find one.
No, you could,
Oh, I'm
in our economy today, you could.
I think so too, I think I could.
But if you don't need to, you know what, your job, your ministry, the way you take care of people is,
That's what I was gonna tell her, that is your job.
It is-
that's your mission, that's your
I know.
purpose.
I agree with you, I know.
Okay, so let's move on to chapter 40. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was mad against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard into prison, the place where Joseph was bound. So he had offended the king so much, their heads were going to roll. And the captain of the guard, verse 4, and the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and Joseph served them, and they continued a season in the ward. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in a prison. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his lord's house, saying, Why do you look so sad today? And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there's no interpreter of it. And Joseph said to them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. Now remember, what was Joseph called by his brothers? A dreamer.
Oh, yeah.
Joseph's got some history with these dreams, so he knows that they come from God. Okay? You know, and before we had the Bible stuff, God spoke to people in dreams and visions. If you remember, Jacob, his father, had a dream, lay down one night when he was really sleeping at Bethel, where the staircase from heaven came down, an angel. That was in a dream.
Sure.
See, so, and no doubt, Jacob had told his kids about the dream, and that's why they went to Bethel, because that's where he met God, a place of God. So Joseph's aware of it. And once again, that's why we share things with our kids, our God moments with our kids, to let them know God's real and He may show up in your life and you don't expect it.
Right.
And they need to hear that. See? Because then Joseph has heard about his dad was a dreamer. And that's why when Joseph told dream, Jacob probably thinking, wait a minute, now I had one of those dreams too. Right? So that's why they called him Jacob when he was really not of faith. He should have, instead of rebuking Joseph, he should have stood up for Joseph in front of his brothers.
Yes.
Right? That makes sense now, right?
Right.
Okay. Verse 9, and the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And the Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into the Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into the Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee unto your place, and you shall deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when you was his butler. So in other words, you're going to get your job back. You're going to be restored and you're going to get your job back. Pharaoh's going to rule in your favor. Okay? Verse 14. But think on me when it shall be well with you. See, he told him his dream. So Joseph knew that God was saying he's going to go back into the presence of Pharaoh again. And Joseph believed it so much, he said, but now when you go back, remember me. Right? But think on me when it shall be well with you, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house, out of this prison. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into this dungeon. Okay? Now, when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was all manner of baked meats, or baked breads for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. Let me tell you something right now. Whenever you see birds in Scripture, it's a bad sign.
Right.
It's a bad sign. Verse 18, and Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days, yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up your head from off of you.
Wow.
And shall hang you on a tree, and all the birds shall eat your flesh from off of you. Wow. And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup into the Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but he forgot him. There's not a whole lot of interpretation in these. This is just a wonderful account of how God moved in their lives, okay? I don't really need to spell this out. It's pretty much, you know, but it's just, again, I'm mindful of the fact that we can learn lessons here. Like, for instance, when you have God moments in your life, times that God's appeared in your life, make sure you tell somebody about it. It's a testimony. It's not to be kept to yourself. God wants you to tell. I know God's real. He showed up in my life. He did this for me. Right?
When we turn our lives over to the Lord and say, Lord, this is your life. I'm just the slave, you might say, like Paul said.
You know. that's what he
So he
desires.
takes some,
That's what he desires.
like
He still
in the
expects us,
Bible.
yeah, he still expects us, even in this day, to step out of the boat. Step out of the boat. It looks like you'll sink, but step out of that boat.
And I read in a devotional several times, it says, our lives affect and impact
Oh,
other
absolutely.
people. So if every day we begin our day by saying, Lord, here am I. I belong to you. Show me the way to go.
Yeah.
Can we expect the, am I wrong to say the best?
No, because that's faith. When we do that, we're expecting God to show up and use us. And God is delighted with faith. Even when we don't feel His presence, when we step out in faith, God's pleased by that. And when we're stepping out in faith, He's opening the door down the road for us. We may not see it, but the door's going to open. And we're going to have yet another opportunity. I don't know about you guys, I put on Facebook, but all this week I've been saying this, and people's like, they'll say, season's greeting or happy holy days, and I say, or holidays, and I say, happy holy day to you. And they'll go, yeah, I guess it is.
Yes, it is.
And I even had a guy at a motel breakfast the other day ask me, he said, I came out for breakfast, and in the morning he said, how are you doing? And I said, better than I deserve. And he said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, if I got what I deserve, I'd split hell right down the middle. And he said, well, why'd you say? I said, man, I'm a sinner saved by grace. I'm just walking in God's blessing. He said, so you're a Christian, right? What gave you that great idea? Ding, 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 ding. What do we have for him, Johnny?
He's a smart fellow, wasn't he?
There's your sign. All right, I don't guess we can go any further tonight, but because it's cold and get y'all home. But we will try to get through. I'm going to probably have to take 2 more weeks to get through Joseph and his brothers and how God used all that. But anyway,
Great story.
Oh, I
I
love
love it, that's a
I
great
do.
story, yeah.
just remember, even when you're in prison, remember, if you read the book of Philippians, that's where you'll find out that Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I'm going to say it. If you didn't hear me the first time, again, I say rejoice.
Right.
And he says that in Philippians because in the book of Acts it says in Philippi, he was put in the inner prison and was going to be killed the next day. And he and Silas, I think it is, had a worship service at midnight. Praise the Lord. And what happened? The Lord sent an earthquake and changed the whole city. So that when he writes back later to the people at Philippi, there was some credibility in a man saying, you can rejoice even when you're in prison. Right? Amen. Okay, you guys.